North Carolina, Piedmont, or backcountry, whatever word you want to use, that what they want from the colonial government is reform. They want regulation. They want very fundamental things. They write petitions to the government asking for things like a secret ballot for voting. Yeah, something that would seem pretty novel back then. Things like the lack of corrupt judges, as people would be living in their homes trying to mind their own business, but these officers, these agents of the state would go over to their house and use this as an excuse to steal their property. Sometimes their own land being purchased out from underneath them. Years and years these regulators faced these issues. So they began to organize in small associations by the mid-1760s. And by 1766 and 1768, they formed the association known as the Regulators. They began holding mass meetings of people all together to discuss how to solve their problem. Following the political systems of the time, they write petitions to the colonial government with hundreds of signatures asking for them to solve their problems. The government ignores them. They try yet again. They sue the government. They sue Edmund Fanning, the sheriff and the sheriffs of Orange County, for the abuses that they faced for years at a time, and they're ignored again and again. By 1768, they finally have enough. They go to the city of Hillsborough, force something from the governor, but he reneges on all promises once he leaves. They finally, in 1770, elect Herman Husband, one of their primary leaders, and as well as another regulator, all the way to the North Carolina General Assembly. They get to the halls of government to finally have their voices heard, and every single thing they say is ignored completely. And so we end up here. Shortly before we arrive here in September of 1770, a small group of regulators finally have enough. They go to the Superior Court building in Hillsborough, North Carolina, force their way into the room, start shouting at the judge to try cases, to actually continue through the systems of government, and again, they're ignored. So they take action in their own hands. They attack other colonial officials, the judge, a lawyer, and as well as Edmund Fanning, beating them in the streets of Hillsborough, starting a riot. You can understand maybe where they're coming from. After all this time, the colonial government under William Tryon finally has enough. That this rebellion, as they start to be called, this insurrection has started. So they passed something at the beginning of the year of 1771 called the Johnson Riot Act. It means that the sheriff of a respective county arrives to an unlawful assembly and orders them to disperse. They have 1 hour or else. Tryon raises an army of 1,000 people with 8 cannons to bring into the backcountry to suppress this rebellion and to bring them under colonial government control, really imperial control. They arrive in Hillsborough a few days before in May and begin working their way down the old Salisbury Road, about where we are today. As here on May 16th of 1771, there is over 2,000 regulators here, as there's about 1,000 militia bearing down on them. As they are assembled here to finally talk about, they send letters to Tryon, final petitions asking that this should be solved peacefully, that they do not want to fight. They say that His Majesty's subjects are not toys to be trifled with. They finally have enough and choose to make their stand here at Alamance. That's when the regulators assembled here see a man walk down the road. A man probably on horseback or along with another person to be able, as the army, a good distance away, begins to march towards them. Many of these regulators arrived armed, with guns, ready to maybe fight. Some arrived unarmed. Some had clubs. Some were Quakers who swear off violence completely. So you wonder why they happen to be here. Maybe it's more of a protest. As the man arrives towards them, they see this man.
The lowest form. You've abused your public trust. Don't come here. You're not wanted.
I'm the sheriff of Orange County, and I have a message from Governor Tryon. To the people now assembled in arms who style themselves regulators, in answer to your petition, I am to acquaint you that I have ever been attentive to your true interest of the country, and to that of every individual residing within it. I lament the fatal necessity to which you have now reduced me, by withdrawing yourselves from the mercy of the
You're a
crown,
bunch of thieves. What the hell with your
as well as the laws of your country. He requires you to lay down your arms, surrender up your outlawed ringleaders, and submit yourselves to the law of the country.
He should arrest
and
you.
rest on the leniency and mercy of the government.
Bunch of scoundrels.
By accepting the terms in 1 hour, from 1 hour from this delivery, from this dispatch, you will prevent an effusion of blood, as you are at this time in a state of war and rebellion against your king, your country, and your laws.
Bunch of thieves.
Royal Governor William
Loyal
Trial.
to the king.
You are not loyal to the government. You have rebelled, you have led riots, you have burned court records, you have threatened to march and sack the capital.
Every legal deed.
You have tried to sack the capital of New Bern. I have said my piece. You have 1 hour, gentlemen.
Go
Go back in Newbern into your palace. Charlotte, so, with hearing words like that from the sheriff of Orange County, that you, as a regulator, very similar to us today, you heard that they would be dispersed and used by violence to disrupt their protest here. They look down the road and they begin seeing the cannons, and over 1,000 men begin to march in to act upon these regulators. The army and these regulators here will wait here on Alamance, right where we stand today, for the next hour, waiting for the expiration of the Riot Act. As you can see, our artillery rolling in there. Tryon lined up 6 cannons in the center, 2 cannons on the side, and as well as 1,000 men lined up in a line, marching through the open woods. It sends a strong message to these regulators that the government here is to suppress their rebellion. And so, what I suggest for you folks, while we are literally waiting that hour for the regulators and for decisions to be made, that what I recommend for you is to talk to some of our regulators. To go over there to the militia, talk to them as they set up, and wait for the battle starting at noon. We'll be starting on the top of the hill over there. A few notes on as well as staging where you guys need to...
He was the only.
And that's fun.
He was the only red kid.
And that's sponge pink. Handle cartridge.
There's people down there yonder over down the bottom of the hill over there.
What did he call him?
Man down cartridge. Governor, what happened in front?
Carry on.
Front.
You can get mine too.
Surrender the rioters and lay down your arms.
Okay. Just stay right behind wherever you are.
Handle cartridge.
Fire upon loyal citizens. We're the king's men here. Are you?
Ram down cartridge.
Are you loyal? Are you loyal to the king? Loyal to us, dog.
Front.
Our money. Our land, our blood. Does he invite you to his palace? Surrender the rioters. We are here to restore the king's peace. We're the king's men. You come over here. Here.
So, to pick up where we left
It's been an
off.
hour. Can I go down? Get their answer?
Approach.
It's noon. An hour has elapsed. The Riot Act has been fully fulfilled. 2,000 regulators still wait the answer. They have chosen to finally, after years of abuse, to make their stand here at Alamance. The sheriff goes over one last time, offers them one final chance to give up their arms, lay down their struggles, and to give up their cause. The regulators, as a mass, as a group of the people, decide to make their stand here. They reject the final demands. The riot add up. There's nothing left for them to do. Tryon waits. Done the final thing. And now, we wait for the government to respond. I would recommend to cover your ears.
Governor, the response was fire and be damned.
We've done all we can. Gun crews, attention! Make ready! Stand ready to fire! Look to your stealth, because we will open fire! Give fire! Maintain fire!
Tryon opened fire with the artillery on the regulators. 8 cannons go off, with massive amounts of grape shot firing into the crowd.
Advance word!
They will continue and keep up a consistent fire on the regulators over and over and over again. As many of the regulators by the second ball as more than 2,000 people flee towards the woods. They hide behind
Hand of cartridge!
million guns they had left and brought with them, those who were even armed, as the government forces keep firing at them. So here's what we're going to do, folks. This is a little complicated, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our massive group we
Hand
have.
down cartridge!
We're going to I want everybody to not go past where we're currently standing. Face the direction and follow me and follow our staff to not follow me. Everybody understand?
Ready!
So let's go this way. Let's move.
Come right.
This way.
Why?
The over 2,000 regulators that were here, many of them after the second volley of artillery dispersed. They ran away, maybe even I wouldn't actually do what you're seeing. Where the regulators stood is literally right where you stand right now. Similar to how they looked up over there, they saw 8 cannons blazing in towards their friends and family who stood here to fight for basic rights and basic regulation. Those who stood behind used their personal guns to hide behind trees and fire back as much as possible. Tryon's artillery will keep firing on the regulators for half hour, shelling these people into submission, riddling trees full of grape shot, and scarring the people who served here. Lying across the field, maybe close to 200 to 300 people taken out in the first volley, over 300 casualties. Now, after they continue firing at the regulators, and as they arrive here, and as the militia keeps firing, eventually, at some point, as that large puff that would have formed, then they begin to slowly, and as the orders get echoed across, begin to cease fire amongst this artillery.
I'm missing a lot of work. But just move like this. No. Is it actually? Everybody. The guns will make fire. If you watch the guns away, you should not even see. You see that fire?
One can maybe imagine. One can maybe imagine what it was like. You are stuck behind a large oak tree, firing the best you can with your own civilian guns over the impending force of an imperial army that's come to suppress you. The experience of the regulators.
They shot! They shot!
Oh yeah.
That was cute. This shit. It was
For basic rights and basic regulation. Those who stood behind used their personal guns to hide behind trees and fire back as much as possible. Tryon's artillery will keep firing on the regulators for half hour, shelling these people into submission, riddling trees full of grape shot, and scarring the people who served here. Lying across the field, may have been over close to 200 to 300 people taken out in the first volley, over 300 casualties. Now, after they continue firing at the regulators, and as they arrive here, and as the militia that would have formed, then they begin to slowly, and as the orders get echoed across, begin to cease fire amongst this artillery. So at a certain point in the battle, after that half hour, groups of the militia begin to advance on the regular. Travel down that way. The regulators begin to, well, as one would, begin to run away. Hundreds of men are scattered across this area as that army advances in a line, slowly, ploddingly, towards the last of the regulators. At a certain point, they begin advancing upon them to take as many prisoners as they could. Grabbing at least around 20 different regulator prisoners. They even take a regulator who is a sharp shooter taking captives here at the battle back towards his camp and unceremoniously sling him from a tree and hang him on the spot. And that's only the beginning. They travel across the rest of the area, forcing regulators to come to Tryon and sign oaths of allegiance, swearing to his government. They then capture 2 more regulators, branded as outlaws. Groups of the militia begin to advance on the regulators who have been pouring fire into them for that last half hour. The whole landscape covered in smoke, bullets riddling everywhere, bodies laying across the field, trees ripped apart as 1,000 men begin advancing down the way here towards the last remnants of the regulators. Loading and firing as they move to suppress them into the woods, they finally advance. The rest of about 500 men travel down that way. The regulators begin to, well, as one would, begin to run away. Hundreds of men are scattered across this area as that army advances in a line, slowly, ploddingly, towards the last of the regulators. At a certain point, they begin advancing upon them to take as many prisoners as they could, grabbing at least around 20 different regulator prisoners.
Oh no.
As they flee, the militia actually pursues the regulators for another hour and a half, traveling a half mile in that direction. At the end of the day, of May 16th of 1771, where 1% of the population of North Carolina, 3,000 people met to solve the regulator crisis. At the end of the day, Tryon will suffer 30 casualties. The regulators, from Tryon's own account, says they suffered over 300. Over maybe around 100 killed and 200 wounded. A heavy price to pay. But of course, that's not the end of the story. It only almost gets worse from there. Tryon then goes on a punitive expedition all across this area, burning people's homes. They even take a regulator who was a sharpshooter taking captives here at the battle back towards his camp and unceremoniously sling him from a tree and hang him on the spot. And that's only the beginning. They travel across the rest of the area, forcing regulators to come to Tryon and sign oaths of allegiance, swearing to his government. They then capture 3 more regulators, branded as outlaws, hang them on the spot. They eventually travel back to Hillsborough, North Carolina, where it all started in 1770. Try 12 of the regulators and sentence 12 of them to be executed. 6 end up being executed at the end of the day. As they stand on the gallows constructed in the city, many spoke. We actually have their words. Many talk about how they were fully justified in what they did. They believed they were on the right side of history. Even one man mid-sentence, calling allusions of God into religion, is hung mid-sentence. So what we're left with, at the end of the day, at the end of the regulator campaign, we're left with not much. Regulator rebellion ends. The reforms don't end up getting adopted. Later on, a new governor comes in and does fix many of their problems. But what we here today, come and visited us here at Alamance Battleground. What we are here to do and to see and to learn is to, most importantly, remember. You might not have heard of the Regulator Rebellion, but this is a chance for you to remember about those regular people, just like you and I, who stood here at Alamance to finally make their voices heard. So, I want to say, it might sound a little weird, I guess, but I want to say thank you to every single one of you who came here, supported us here at Alamance Battleground, and thank you for coming here today. I'll stay behind and answer questions you guys might have, as well as the rest of our volunteers here will be available. And other than that, I want to thank you guys very much. You folks have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much.